Hi there, this is my analysis, breakdown, reaction review for House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 2, Rhaenyra the Cruel. I'm sorry I'm getting this out so late. I'm putting it out Friday night. I was playing around with the format I was going to use with my channel, and I don't like doing immediate reaction videos, which are supposed to be short to compete with all the other ones out there, because everyone and their aunt is making a reaction video where I'm trying to make more analysis. That I don't like just putting out, these are my instant thoughts. I like reading the post-episode interviews first, that I never just watch the episode cold. I watch the inside the episode that comes on after it, and then I watch the 20-minute behind-the-scenes, the house the dragons built thing. So that's just really not my style, and I'd be doing you a disservice. It'd be watered-down content if I was doing a blind reaction. Even if I was just, and then if I was doing like, okay, these are literally 7 sentences, these are the top points, I'm working on a longer video, that would lessen the impact as well. So what I was racing around this week doing was trying to get the review done first, then all of the tie-in thematic videos I like putting out. This point onward for the next, 6 episodes, officially, I'm going to be putting out a episode analysis review thing like this one in time for the weekend, by like mid-Friday, hopefully. And then, just as the episode comes out, I could plausibly race out, like for episode 2, for example, I could race out a 5-minute video on, oh, this is who Daeron is, when they were explaining that. Or the Cargill twins or something. You just focus on 1 or 2 thematic points. Or if episode 1, Craig and Stark, 5 minutes of this is how I feel they handled him. So the new plan is, because everything comes out between Sunday night and Monday night is when we get the most site traffic for recappers, text-based magazines, like, Vanity Fair, Variety. They say everything is in that 24-hour period. It's 10 times as much as everything else. But I can't make a detailed analysis in that short of a time. That's what they did. They raced out crap reviews by the end of Monday during the run of Game of Thrones, and then wouldn't follow up with a more in-depth one going, on closer analysis, what they're doing with Jon and Sansa here makes no goddamn sense. It was just a race to the bottom. Now other channels like Red Team Review, Preston Jacobs is on break, but the combined Game of Thrones podcast they do, he puts out an immediate reaction that's 10 minutes, and then a long-form podcast on the weekend. And I toyed with the idea of doing that, but it's the preview would be so watered down, I feel uncomfortable doing it, that if I can only put out 10 minutes worth of content within 24 hours, that video would become redundant and no one would ever need to watch it again by the time I get the long-form podcast out. So the amount of finite labor hours that go into making, I could race out a 10-minute clip by Monday morning, makes more sense to talk about one of the thematic shorts, like, oh, this is who Daeron is, or I liked how they worked in that point about Daemon's father in this, or hypothetically, something like that. So I won't make immediate reaction videos, because part of this is also my job schedule. Season 1 of this, if you remember 2 years ago, I would stay up all night making an audio-only podcast as my immediate reaction, but even then I watched the inside the episode and behind-the-scenes videos first. It was just, this is my whole reaction in time for Monday, because I was able to stay up all night. My work schedule shifted, so I'm not physically capable of pulling an all-nighter on Sunday night anymore. Even though I'd want to, and when you read things like what Kim Renfro, who's nice, and she doesn't work for Business Insider anymore, she does podcasts now, but when they talk about the news cycle they had on late Game of Thrones, all the reporters just pulled all-nighters Sunday to Monday because they were focused on that narrow window. So I'm sorry that videos will double up a bit this weekend, because I'm shifting models to rip off the Band-Aid, dump a lot of videos this weekend because it makes more sense. Long-form review out by Friday, by the weekend. And before that, like right at the night of the episode, maybe later, depending on what comes up in the episode, I'm going to try to make short thematic videos. Because as Carbine keeps telling me from Red Team Review, I do script these out. I'm reading a script, but just so I don't stumble over my words, that much like a tweet, I need to keep a word count. that I have to keep a certain sentence count if I can't go more than 10 sentences on a thematic video or something that I'm timing. I'm playing around with this. I've already made some of them, and they are hopefully more professional as opposed to, hey, here's talk radio, audio-only podcast, I'm free-form rambling. I'm going to start trying to learn how to use time limits on intentionally short videos and just, oh, this is a topic that came up, or oh, this is what Driftmark is like. Little things that are meant to be informative. Particularly for the TV-only audience that doesn't know what this stuff is. And the deep dives are more for, okay, if you're familiar with the book stuff. Also wrecked my schedule a lot is whenever there's a controversy. So I had to make it like a special couple of videos on, oh, they toned down Blood and Cheese from the books a bit, and why I actually agree with them, that practical concerns like child actors are difficult to work with, the audience, TV-only audience would revolt against that. That took time away from the thematic videos I wanted to make about stuff coming up. So far, I've had no real problems with Season 2, because like I said, I'm okay with their take on Blood and Cheese, and as for Craig and Stark only having one scene, there are now rumors that they just spread it out more with the Winter Wolves. I'll have a wait-and-see attitude there. So all this is introduction for, I'm shifting gears, that didn't really work, I was blindsided by, whenever a controversy comes up, I have to focus on that instead of what I wanted to do, just talking about nerdy trivia. All of that aside, Rhaenyra the Cruel, Episode 2. Written by Sarah Hess and directed by Claire Kilner. And they don't tell us the episode titles in advance anymore, or who's writing them. Like, on Game of Thrones Wiki and other fan sites, we find out when the opening credits roll 9 p.m. Sunday night, same time as you guys. So I'm not even sure who's writing all of these in advance. We know the directors. Episode 2 is officially one of the best episodes House of the Dragon has ever produced. I think everyone agrees that Season 1's best episode was Episode 8, Lord of the Tides, with the Velaryon trial and Viserys' Last Supper. This is easily vying for that as top position, and I know we can have our disagreements on exactly which one's above the other, but those two combined, Lord of the Tides and Rhaenyra the Cruel, are vying for top space. Each one is either the first or the second place. And indeed, possibly some of the best episodes in this entire Game of Thrones Westeros live-action franchise, even compared to stuff the early seasons of Game of Thrones did, like peak Game of Thrones Season 4-ish, like, because they had an outside director do it, I actually think that the peak was the Battle of Castle Black, and with Neil Marshall, that just everything they were doing with that, that's what I expected from a TV adaptation of George R. R. Martin's works. And just this was totally on point. Everyone is saying this, of course, thankfully. I mean, Red Team Reviewers already pointed that out. Everyone opening with, this is one of the best episodes they've ever made. And the reason I'm stressing this is, despite being one of the best episodes they ever made, if you think about it, it had surprisingly little lore in it worth analysis. I mean, case in point, the amazing, clearly Emmy-winning scene between Rhaenyra and Daemon, where it's just a one-on-one scene in her private chambers. What can I really say about that? Because it's not referring to prior things that you haven't seen. Anything they're talking about is stuff that a TV audience has seen with their own eyes. And it's not tying into wider topics or themes or lore things. What can I really add to that? That's another reason this video is late, because I was struggling to think of anything to say. It's mostly just me gushing over it. So I hope you understand, say in the comments, this is an odd episode to make a breakdown video about, an analysis video, just in terms of all of that. I will try, but just the result of this was me deciding to officially shift my schedule, that, okay, the review comes out Friday. Within the first 24 hours, I'm trying to get out thematic videos of what I feel. I know my take on Blood and Cheese would be different from someone else's, but how I feel they handled adaptation choices or just lore things that come up, do those first throughout the week. Because the review, I don't like doing previews. I like making a long-form review. Might even be out by Sunday if there's a lot of changes I need to talk about before that. I'm aiming for Fridays. Of just, for the hardcore book crowd, this was my take on an episode. But I said what I normally do to try to limit what I'm saying is to limit to the top 7 most notable points, either good or bad. Because 7 is a good number, just a top 7 list of the top 7 notable things worth talking about. And because there wasn't really that much lore in this episode, I had to play it a little loose, and you'll see what I mean. Another thing I'm going to do, and this is why I was toying with this and didn't make sense, was the first 3 of these are things I want to split off into other videos, so I'm only going to say a paragraph about them. And I was wondering, well, do I do that first? Do I have to make the review first to then split off a video? No, I'm going to be doing that in reverse. That point 1 is Daeron, and point 2 is the duel between the Cargill twins. In the future, if I was following this plan back on Monday, I would have done a video about the Cargill duel first, then the review. But I only realized it makes more sense to do it the other way around by the middle of the week when I said just time restrictions in the middle of a work week and I'm no longer physically able to pull all-nighters on Sunday night. I have to do it the other way around, so bear with me. But the first ones are rapid-fire, really short, because I'm going to do other videos about them. Point 1. Hooray! Daeron is introduced and is established to exist in the TV show. I kept saying I thought they'd mention him in episode 2. And I was half right, because I kept saying they're going to mention him probably in episode 2, when I think Alicent's brother Gwaine will show up for the funeral progress. Now we're hearing from screeners that Gwaine shows up in episode 3. He'll come next episode. I thought logically if someone just came from Old Town, they'd mention Daeron. But I was half right, because they ended up mentioning him in episode 2 anyway, but when Otto is returning to Old Town. So, keeping it short here, I'm going to do a separate video on that, but hooray, Daeron. But other than that, what more can I add? I've been reporting on we're not sure if Daeron is in the show, this is who he is, for like 2 years now. I can't really add more to that. Then we have, this is going to be a separate video, the Cargill Bowl, the duel of the Cargill twins. This is a standout sequence from every aspect, and I wasn't actually heavily looking forward to it. I was surprised by how good it was. Thinking of the rumors, going, oh yeah, Cargill Bowl is episode 2. We knew that was coming. Fine, I know this, but I saw it as almost perfunctory. Like the way, oh yeah, Game of Thrones will have 2 characters fighting each other, and we kind of got bored with it by the end. That they put in the time and effort to make us care, to have this feel like a gut punch that these 2 brothers who love each other are fighting, even though there wasn't that much time devoted to them. But they were set up at the end of season 1, and mostly just in terms of the scripting for what they had in one episode, the camera work and the stunt choreography, just everything made this a standout fight. And basically my only point about Cargill Bowl, because, yeah, this is pretty much what I expected from the book, they took what was basically, a pretty basic idea, what's almost a trope, brother against brother in a civil war, and it's a trope and a cliche, but it's all about the execution. That it was executed so well that it outright elevated the art form. That this is pinnacle stuff, even though it isn't even that innovative from a narrative standpoint. It's just, when you have competent people doing an idea really well, it doesn't need to subvert expectations. And all that other stuff. I'm going to make a separate video about all of this, this was just a really well done sequence. Lore-wise, there isn't much to say. Obviously, they took a middle path between what the different rival historians said happened. As a book reader, I always assumed it was somewhere in the middle, where it wasn't this hours-long epic duel, but they were, I thought they probably were declaring their anguished love for each other even as they were fighting. That's what happened. The one big change is that then it ends with Eric throws himself on his sword in utter anguish that I just killed my own twin brother. That isn't in any version in the book, but I thought it worked really well. If that's what someone in that situation would potentially do, just the utter anguish of that, it's unimaginable. And even book fan sites like Westeros.org, and I like looking at their thing first, because, well, if the hardcore book fans think this, what do I think? I want to hear from everyone. So before I make a review, one of the reasons I want to make a review by the following weekend is I want to see what the hardcore book fans think, and also watch some blind reaction videos by channels who don't know the books, to see what they think of things, so I can assess what all the viewpoints are. They also loved Cargill Bowl, and they acknowledged, yeah, it's slightly different, but the whole, I wonder if they're going to do this in episode 3. that Elio and Linda pointed out, it's probable that the idea Cargill is going with is that the historians don't know everything. That Rhaenyra and her followers told everyone, the maesters and everyone publicly said, oh, Eric died of his wounds, because the faith frowns on suicide and considers it shameful. So to spare the honor of this man who saved her life valiantly and fulfilled his vows, and we can understand at his anguish he would do that, they decide to give a cover story. I wondered that independently of them, but Elio and Linda already said that. We see in the preview for next episode that there's going to be a funeral for them. I wonder if they're going to show that they put a spin on, oh, well, he died of his wounds, he died in service, to spare him the shame of people wouldn't understand why he did that. But even the hardcore book fans, oh, that added so much more impact to it. It felt naturally earned, and all of this just, I don't even think that, oh, it's a change. Well, it was an unreliable narrator moment in the books, whole separate video on that. But just, yeah, it was a generic fight that I had heard was coming from the books for over a decade. I think they actually mentioned Cargill brothers fighting each other in the main novels well before The Princess and the Queen was in print. And it was just, the execution was done so well. What more can I add? This is what you do when you have competent crew members who aren't being micromanaged by idiot showrunners, but allowed to do their jobs. So that's point 2. Daeron, Cargill Bowl. Point 3. The invented funeral progress for Aegon's son Jaehaerys was pure genius, both in basic concept and execution, and I don't have that much more to add to that other than gushing about how great it was. And look at me, angry hardcore book fan, gushing over that Cargill and his team get it, that we're not inventing things for the sake of inventing things, but Fire and Blood is an outline. And Martin has said it's an outline, it's an in-universe history book. And they're trying to fill in what happened between the lines. Not as a secret history of, oh, this is the secret history that we're subverting Fire and Blood. It's just, logically, the historians didn't have access to everything that happened, and this is like historical fiction, like the Tudors or something. Well, the Tudors went a bit far, but you know what I mean, that they're saying, well, this could have happened. That this funeral progress wasn't in the source material at all, but fit the story extremely well as an organic expansion of what we know about these characters, and stressing the importance of political propaganda, which actually got a lot more attention in the main novels, where you have people putting spins on things of, oh, Robb Stark and his men feast on the slain and stuff like that the Lannisters say. That how you are perceived by the noble houses and even commoners affects politics. That's a big element in the books. And remember, in contrast, at the end of Game of Thrones Season 6, best season ever, according to the hype people, when Cersei blew up the Vatican with zero political repercussions? That this episode is focused so much on what do the commoners think, even when you're semi-justified in something as shocking as a rat catcher helped infiltrate the Red Keep and murder the king's eldest son, his heir. And, well, I killed 100 to find the one. It's not like he's just doing this to be the Mad King. That I don't care if I hurt innocent people, but this man, one of them killed my son, and I don't care if I kill the other ones. He's not insane for doing this, he's just being ruthless. And you could even sympathize, well, he's a father, he's clearly mourning. Still, they are worried about the public perception, versus Cersei they just wanted to keep Lena Headey in a major role of, oh, she'll be queen. How? Not just that she does it backed up with her army, but that the Reach is treating her as, oh, the Tarleys, well, she's our queen. Based on what? That you can tell they just gave her someone else's storyline, like Young Griff or something, and that'll come out when Winds of Winter comes out eventually, of just, this is not what Cersei's storyline is, and it is absurd that this isn't good television. Well, she's queen now. That isn't a stroke of brilliance, blowing up the Great Sept. That was... And there's memes about this, of course, of people going, at the time it seemed brilliant, but by season 7, when we realized there were no repercussions, it was just, we don't feel like tying up loose ends with the Tyrell storyline anymore. Just how insulting it was. But by way of comparison to Game of Thrones, I'm going to talk about this in another one eventually, because they're going to do other public perception things throughout the season. So not this week, but another week. Just, this was pure genius, and even Westeros.org thought this is a genius move. This is something the politically savvy Otto would do. This is something that fits the novels. Just think about what PR and propaganda are like in a world without television or newspapers. That you need to show the people what Rhaenyra's followers, her faction, did. If not her, then Daemon, and, well, you're responsible for that. That the rival crown prince, Jaehaerys, this little 4-year-old boy, was beheaded. And to show them that. And the other thing I'm really happy about, as others have said, that I actually think Sarah Hess is a good writer, because I've looked at all the commentaries, and she made some really good decisions on other things. And everyone blames her for just, it's a fluke that they blame her for, I just feel that the elements in episode 9 didn't quite come together, where they give Rhaenys more to do. Okay, let's have her burst out of the floor at the coronation, and it doesn't, but she chooses not to kill them out of honor and stuff, and that didn't land very well. But there's other episodes she did I really loved. I really liked episode 6, introducing all the younger generation, or, we know from behind-the-scenes books, Sarah Hess had final pass, officially still does, on writing all of the dialogue for Rhaenyra or Alicent. Individually. I don't mean Rhaenyra Alicent scenes. I mean when Rhaenyra's talking to Daemon in season 1, or Alicent is talking to Otto, Sarah Hess had final pass because they said, well, you're a woman. We think you would know how a woman talks better, and you're the highest ranking woman in the writing staff, so Ryan Condal would defer to her when she said, I think Rhaenyra would actually say it this way. So you can't really pick and choose. That she did a lot of other good things in season 1. So what other people are saying, that I really hope that this was such a good episode with her name prominently in the credits, will finally get all of that bickering to fade. That we didn't need that. We have to be united against the common enemy, not attacking our own writers here. That I think Sarah Hess did a really good job. She did something really she should be proud of. She might be nominated for an Emmy for this script, frankly. It's that good. And just little things said, little turns of phrase and dialogue, and character insights in the dialogue throughout the episode. Good for Sarah Hess, and just we didn't need that level of dissension in our ranks of fighting about Sarah Hess anymore. If you followed the live tweets of this, I went back and checked, because we didn't know the writers in advance. When people saw written by Sarah Hess, on Twitter they were groaning, writing groan, Sarah Hess. And that attitude clearly faded by the end of the episode. So Condal admitted it was specifically Sarah Hess's idea to invent this funeral progress, and then they ran with it from there. Not just that she wrote it, it was specifically her idea. And it was a really good episode, and this wraps up all those other problems. The other 4 points I have about the episode are broad things, though. Point 4 out of 7. They are following through on their promise that Season 2 would quickly give more focus to the younger generation that they haven't had before, of Alicent's kids and the combined Rhaenyra Daemon kids. There's really 3 prominent ones on each side. That in the Greens, it's Aegon, Helaena, Aemond. On the Black side, it's now surviving Jace and the girls, Baela and Rhaena, because Joff isn't really that much of a character yet. We saw young Aegon and young Viserys in this, which is nice, but they're not really characters. So these 3 kids on both sides, we have seen a lot of the Greens in these 2 episodes, and just even more so in this episode. The amazing stuff with Tom Glynn-Carney as Aegon. What more can I add? That this guy deserves an Emmy nomination. Emmys all around is what everyone's saying about this episode. That they've been rounding out Helaena, had a scene with her mother with actual dialogue. It was, this is for my boy, just shutting her down. This isn't about you. Aemon didn't get a lot of scenes, but they were intriguing scenes. This more in last episode. This one just that, he's at a brothel and he needs a mother figure out, and that kind of makes sense for someone who has the issues he has. So they gave them decent screen time. Now, on the Black side of things, Jace really didn't have much to... None of them really had much to do last episode. Jace did. I'm talking about the girls didn't have much to do last episode. Jace was amazing. This one, we actually had Baela talking and having a one-on-one dialogue scene with Jace, which was character building and talking about, what do you think of our respective father figures? It wasn't a giant scene on the scale of Aegon breaking down that his child is dead, of course. But okay, here it is. And we know from leaks and even trailers now that Bela and Rhaena are going to have a lot to do later, like starting in episode 3. Like, Rhaena hasn't talked yet in season 2, but we know that a lot of the focus of episode 3 will be on Rhaena. So I'm not upset about that. I mean, similarly, the other Velaryons like Corlys haven't had that much to do yet, but we know what's coming, so I'm not concerned. Point 4, though, is specifically these basically 6 younger characters they said they'd start doing more with. On the green side, they've really delivered it. On the black side, they're starting to, but that's more just due to the way the narrative was structured, that they're getting to it, the season isn't over yet. Just amazing stuff with Aegon that without really, I don't want to say changing, without rewriting the character, but just showing a different side of him, that he's still a brat, but he has love in him, and he is anguished, and just that they have him go, no, I will not have my little son's body dragged through the streets like a dead dog, is humanizing, that even after he fires Otto and he's being arrogant, that you later see him crying alone, weeping for his son alone in his bedroom. And how dysfunctional the Greens are, that Otto can't really comfort Alicent, she can't comfort them. And, she wasn't ready to be a mother. She was 15 when she had her first child. This is all beyond her. So, the Greens, great stuff. The Blacks, they're working on it, because you think, oh, the Blacks are so well adjusted. Jace's mother married her own uncle, and he is engaged to his first cousin/stepsister, but they're surprisingly nice, so we're getting more of the younger generation, episode by episode. And even more broadly, the last couple of points here. Point 5. The performances were amazing. What more can I add? And well written, matching the characters. Rhaenyra fighting Daemon. Then Otto when he's fighting Aegon. I can't add more to this other than to say this is why Season 1 existed. That when the old HBO leadership wanted to start the narrative when Viserys dies, they wanted to basically start, like, Vhagar killing Arrax was supposed to be like episode 1 or something. And Martin said, no, you need to adapt the Rogue Prince novella, show the reign of Viserys, to show the backstory, the history of these characters, why they have these complicated relationships and hate each other, and mixed with jealousy and all these other things, that this is why we needed the setup season of Season 1. I mean, tell me in the comments, just without Season 1, could these scenes have existed? That the years of history and the complicated time skips and all of the time skips as they affect Rhaenyra, Daemon, and even as they affect Aegon with I'm in the shadow of Otto and everyone leading me around, and now suddenly I'm in charge and I get to tell everyone, I get to dare and say what to do. It's stimulating. You would not have had the narrative impact on that. Not much more to say other than, other people could pick apart little specific things, every little gesture and motion and word, but it wasn't just these performances, these faces, because it was dialogue-based, and they're walking around, and wide shot, gesturing with their whole body, so there was cinematography because the camera is following them. The performance is a full-body performance, not just, it was what used to be a wholesome Emmy-level performance before it turned into the gaming the system of the Emmys for Emmy bait. This felt like an earned Emmy performance, which will inevitably go up against something which is pandering for Emmys, and who knows if they'll win. But just, wow, was this Emmy-level stuff. In my note, I make handwritten notes when I'm writing. The whole scene, I just literally wrote down and circled one thing. Emmy win. And also, after the scene ended, I wrote, quote, this feels like watching a theatrical movie. Seriously, it felt like, in terms of sense memory, it really felt like when that Coen brother recently made that Hamlet movie with Denzel Washington. Just the gravitas. I mean, obviously it was a black and white movie, but similar thing, like a Shakespearean movie, but with people talking in modern diction. Of just the emotion and level of that. This was a movie quality camera work and acting and writing and everything. It really felt like this modern Shakespearean Macbeth and Lady Macbeth having an argument when Rhaenyra and Daemon are fighting. But more than that, another thing was, it felt like a Lord of the Rings level of production quality. Lord of the Rings wasn't really meant to be an acting vehicle, so it was like that level of drama mixed with the Shakespearean level acting. Just, and I'm not going to weigh apples and oranges on who was better, Rhys Ifans or Matt Smith, because they were different scales. That Daemon, it's really just this one giant scene, which was, I think, the better scene, blowing everyone away, because it's based on 20 years of history. But Rhys Ifans, he had a few more scenes and more range. That when you have him at the small council at the beginning urging, manipulating but not in entirely self-interest, the best way to avenge your son is to propagandize his death and show people what they did. And of course his amazing, just when he's that slow turn and closing his eyes, what has Kristen done? But then at the end he's almost sympathetic with Alicent. And I'm not sure how he played that. I've sinned, I don't want to hear it. If it was, I don't want to hear it, or don't tell me, or in the sense of, you don't need me to forgive you. Whatever it is, I forgive it. Something like that. But just, he had such range. It wasn't just that one scene. It was the whole scene, the whole episode as a whole. Ifans did so much. And while I think one-on-one, I like the Daemon thing more, he did more. So just everyone deserves an Emmy. Emma Darcy, nomination at least. Emma Darcy, Matt Smith, Rhys Ifans, Tom Glencarney. 4 off the top of my head, probably more throughout the episode. Even Liv Cook had pretty decent material in this episode. Just when she's crying at the beginning, that it's hard to do physically, talk through sobbing and make it seem realistic. So just point 5, how are these people not getting Emmy nominations? Oh, but one addendum to point 5, this even extended to Mysaria. I know not like Emmy level, because it wasn't that big of a thing, but this, others have remarked on this, it felt like reintroducing Mysaria from scratch, and better. And yes, others pointed out that even since episode 1, they've been dialing back her accent, which I felt was distracting and a shame, because Sonoya Mizuno is really a major movie actor. She's been in major projects before. She can act, and it was just, the accent was distracting. Good that they dialed it back, but first episode, everyone was just, the one thing they said about Mysaria was, oh look, they dialed back her accent. This episode, they're actually talking about her as a character and Sonoya's acting ability. That just reintroducing, because as they're introducing her to Rhaenyra after 20 years, they're reintroducing the character. And without even giving, like, lore things, just I worked my way up from nothing, and she felt like a sympathetic character, and she's really Rhaenyra's Varys, basically, so I'm the spy master, worked my way up from nothing, from being a slave. Clearly not, it's not meant to be on the same level as the Daemon scene or the Otto scene, but it was so drastically improved. Mysaria was genuinely worth noting and commenting on and mentioning here. Point 6. All of the other behind-the-camera crew members were also amazing and deserve Emmy Awards. Film production in terms of individually, the camera work, the music, the costumes, and even the set design. So I have bullet points in my notes here. The camera work deserves an Emmy. That Claire Kilner deserves a Best Director nomination. And just, if you look at the behind-the-scenes thing and pay attention to the Daemon and Rhaenyra scene, how much they are using Steadicam rigs. That whereas Game of Thrones would have had just alternating between 2 close-ups of their faces with no movement, they had guys in Steadicam rigs following them around the room as they gesticulate, and not just shifting angles. I mean, when Rhaenyra stands up, the camera moves up with her. And you don't even notice it because it's not, oh, it's intruding on it. They make it a point to have Steadicams follow people through these giant new sets they've built. The camera work in the funeral progress, also amazing. That, oh look, we actually bothered to use slow motion for once. That she says in the behind the scenes, I filmed the whole thing at double frame rate, knowing that then I could pick and choose when to go slow-mo on the flower petals falling through as they're showering them with it through the funeral progress. But mixing that with use of wide shot, that it really feels like how expansive King's Landing feels now. The world feels bigger because of that better camera work, which is just the other show didn't know how to do because they they keep going, oh, Benioff and Weiss are these master filmmakers. They officially had no prior experience working with cinema and film. In the medium of film and cinema, visually, they were not good at it. Frequently said it's the world's most expensive film school. We hate using flashbacks because we're bad at it. We hate using slow-mo because we don't understand it. And they really didn't know how cinematography worked. That this is just, when people, and I've talked about this before, I'm going to have a cinematography series eventually, and I have a lot of notes from things they have said behind the scenes interviews. When people saw even the first episode of the first season of House of the Dragon and went, wow, this visually looks noticeably better than Game of Thrones, just the way it's filmed. Because to the casual viewer, cinematography works even if you don't know why it works, the principles they're using, which the old show preyed on, that the casual viewer couldn't say, you're not using enough camera motion, but you feel it on an instinctive level, that you pick up on these things that this show they point out when they're doing cinematography stuff. More on that in weeks to come, of course. So the camera work was amazing. The music. This was arguably the first time that Ramin Djawadi's musical score for the prequel really made an impact on me across an entire episode. Obviously, season 1, we had decent music and a few standouts for a scene or two, like the Rhaenyra theme that plays during her coronation and her investiture. It starts when her investiture, then is this magnificent reprise. It started in the Royal Hunt, then when the crowning on Dragonstone was amazing. But it's only one thing out of a full episode. Or the Velaryon theme with all those do-do-do-do with, I can't imitate this low wind instrument. Very good, but it's not a banger that you can like the Greyjoy theme is great, but it wasn't consistently across a whole episode, and I don't blame him for that, because, they were only in one physical location. There isn't, it's harder for him to have, even a Flea Bottom theme when we don't see Flea Bottom for more than, one episode. Or different sets of characters, compared to Game of Thrones. One episode would be with the Starks, the next would be with the Greyjoys. That kind of thing. So this was the first time that at multiple points throughout the episode, not just one standout moment, but the episode as a whole, the music was such a standout. And this isn't Ramin's fault, it's just the source material gave him more to work with this time. Just the stuff in the Royal Progress, particularly that gradual, I didn't notice it at first, the war drums building as Daemon is fighting near the end of the Daemon Rhaenyra scene, and then as he storms out. I was just geared up from that. And other scenes as well. Other things I don't know as much about. Costuming. Costume Co. on her channel, Heidi knows a lot more about costuming than I do. Just the new Rhaenyra costume that she wears through most of the episode with the sparkly embroidery on it is amazing. And just to point out, we have a new costume designer this year, Carolyn McCall from Downton Abbey. I've talked about this in preview videos, but Carolyn McCall has really made quite an impression in only 2 episodes. So give Claire Kildare an Emmy for the camera work. Give Ramin Djawadi another Emmy for the new music themes he's developed for Season 2. Give Carolyn McCall an Emmy for the costumes. And last but not least, give an Emmy to Jim Clay for set design. And it wasn't just the scale or all the connecting sets. Behind the scenes, they have all these videos about how we built Dragonstone. All of those rooms, like the bedroom, the council chamber, and the library, you can walk down hallways to them, and we try to follow people with cameras to show off they connect. But specifically the design work and artistry that went into Dragonstone, and it feels like this alternate culture of the Valyrians, that it's vaguely Etruscan, vaguely Persian inspired culture, that just the work that went, it's not just the bare stone of a council chamber, like the furnishings and stuff, and the way that Rhaenyra's private chambers are decorated. Not even getting into the nerdy details of in the behind the scenes video, they talk about how we made this library set, and because a camera could be pointed at anything, there's so much nerdy lore stuff actually written on the books. We eat that stuff up. We're eating well today. But even just Rhaenyra's chamber, just everything in that one scene, Rhaenyra's chamber, from the acting, the scripting from Sarah Hess, the use of Steadicams by Claire Kilner, the Rhaenyra's costume, the set design of this is what a Valyrian private chambers looks like, this Etruscan Persian mashup, and the music swelling. Like, this felt like what this is Lord of the Rings level stuff. Every aspect of that scene was brilliance. That's what puts it a little more over the top for me than the Otto Aegon one, just because the music wasn't as in the set we've already seen, still really good. But I liked Otto across the episode as a whole more than just this one perfect scene. If there is such a thing as a perfect scene, I don't know if there's such a thing as a perfect episode, but a perfect scene, that was it. Just, this is art. This is surpassing the medium, elevating the medium. So you see why I was reluctant to make this review, because this is just me gushing about the episode. There wasn't much in the way of lore other than this is what not just a good adaptation of Martin's book, but a good TV show, television as drama as art should look like. Everything was here. And point 7, this is more of a catch-all. We are seeing more of the world beyond the Red Keep, where we were mostly focused in Season 1. We're seeing more of the wider world thematically and also literally. Even though this episode was technically just still focused on King's Landing, Dragonstone, and Driftmark. It's just that we saw different parts of King's Landing, Dragonstone, and Driftmark. That King's Landing, we're seeing the street level more. Dragonstone, they built new rooms, like this is the library, this is Rhaenyra's chambers. And Driftmark, we're seeing a lot more of the docks, which we only saw briefly in Season 1. But some of the advanced reviews are actually criticizing that we see more of the small folk, which I thought was silly because they're not really that long scenes. We know from, because we read the book, we know these are actually major recurring characters they're just setting up in advance, that they are going somewhere with this. And that it's for the relatively little screen time, it made the world feel bigger. And I said this even in the first episode with the petition scene with Aegon in the throne room. It makes the world feel bigger to have the peasants petitioning the king about these are issues we're facing. Well, winter is coming and we're running low on salt because of the blockade. We can't preserve meat for winter. All a major theme in the book. But that was just one scene last episode. Now we're actually showing this is what people living in King's Landing outside of the royal castle are like. There's Hugh's home that he's not living in a slum, and he's a skilled laborer, but he says he doesn't have extra money. He has a wife and a sick daughter. That isn't in the book, but I thought it was... They're showing how he's going to break bad, basically. And Eva Westeros said, no, we got the whole idea that this is his character arc, that they're going with it. And I just love, as a book fan who loves world building, that Hugh's scene brought up that the blockade has caused inflation, which is something that happens in Tyrion's storyline in The Clash of Kings. That, well, the prices of food are skyrocketing because there's a blockade, as it would in any city under a partial siege or a blockade like that. And I love that they answer the question right away. I mean, the characters were there, and they were okay for what they were for a short scene, but explaining, Hugh goes, how could we be running low on food so quickly, the city be running so low on food so quickly? The blockade has only been in place for 2 weeks. And that's just on shipping, like the land-based supply routes are still open. And they have a response where she goes, well, everyone who had enough extra coin to afford to immediately started panic buying. So everyone has started hoarding almost immediately, and it drove the prices up for people who couldn't afford to hoard. And I think I'm probably not alone, just many other reviews I saw, watching it, I went, oh, sense memory of COVID-19, but other people in their reviews went, oh, of course they have to bring up the hoarding we saw when COVID-19 began, but that's what happens when a city is under blockade. We saw that in A Clash of Kings. They're setting it up and this we've seen in trailers, this will lead to a food riot, which we think is happening in episode 7. Not too big of a spoiler, it's in the season trailer. But they're setting this up in advance and explaining, well, the prices have tripled already because people are hoarding. And panic buying was elegant in its simplicity. So just as world building, I like that they're actually setting it up. It isn't that much screen time. I mean, others have pointed out, this is already one of the longest episodes they've ever made. Did it kill you to have a brief 2-minute scene showing a smith saying, wow, the prices have really gone up for the commoners? That really added to the episode. Other little things like showing the Velaryons briefly with Adam, and now we have Adam now, Alan's brother, they introduced. But when I say the world beyond the Red Keep, I don't just mean thematically, I mean, or even that, oh, we saw this guy's house. Physically, how much better they were at filming this and making it look like a location. That Claire Kilner is actually the director who did the most filming of the outside the Red Keep scenes in season 1. That she was the director on both episode 4, when Rhaenyra and Daemon go out and see a farce and then go to a brothel, then episode 9, where they're hunting for Daemon and they run into Mysaria again. So really, those were the only two outside the Red Keep street scenes that we saw in season 1. Kilner has established herself as the street-level King's Landing person. So it makes sense that in this, and I even think Alan Taylor did a decent job with it last episode, but relative to the story he was given. But just, wow, when you see the funeral progress and how well she was able to both film it in live action, because it was this huge location shoot in the streets of Caceres, Spain, which really added to it. But then when you see the use of camera work that Kilner has, again, instead of close-ups on Helena and Alicent all the time, she is careful to intercut with wide shots showing we actually had a crowd of extras this big. This is how big the real street we were filming on was. Whereas Benioff and Weiss would waste location shoots on close-ups so you couldn't tell what we bothered to film on location. Why aren't you showing off the location? And on top of that, even, yes, working with digital. I'm not knocking that you had a wide shot of the real streets of Caceres, but then on the horizon line, that they add in a city skyline of some archways and the castle in the background, which doesn't really intrude on it, but just to make it look like this is a real city, that it's that big, was amazing. And just how much they expanded the street level view. Or another thing, just it looked big rewatching it when Ulf, the drunk, who's pickpocketing, rounds a corner and the camera slowly widens out to see they've hung 100 rat catchers from the castle walls, and it looks like a city street. They also said they actually, like talked about last review, they really did build it. They knew they would need King's Landing street sets for the season for the food riots and the other street scenes, so they're showing them off, and as they should. That they said before the outside of the Red Keep was just a courtyard. Now it's like 4 times as big, and there's like 2 or 3 city street sets that we can walk around in and through editing make look like many more streets by redressing them. So that was great. And just the way they did that. Another thing that stood out for me, for I don't know why, was just this really good helicopter shot of when Mysaria is heading back down the beach of Dragonstone to board her ship. It actually felt like I was on an island for once, instead of Dragonstone just showing off the actors walking on the beach. It looked cool, it felt like a shot of a helicopter in the Caribbean or something. That it felt like 360-degree immersion. More than that, because Kilner even said I wanted to show the petals falling through the air. That really, in my notes, I said this has the sense memory of watching the Minas Tirith Gondor scenes in Lord of the Rings, is what the funeral progress felt like. Those scenes in Lord of the Rings where they're throwing flowers in the air at the coronation, or when Faramir's troops are heading out. It felt that good. I would tell Kilner, it felt like I was watching Lord of the Rings Return of the King in the Gondor scenes. And, another short tangent before I'm this deep into my heavy lore podcast already. Notice that this episode had a brothel scene that didn't produce significant complaints about being gratuitous, because it had a gender nudity balance between, okay, there's, the girls doing a fan dance, but then there's Aemon naked with a strategically placed leg, and just that there was a gender balance, because again, Claire Kilner did the brothel scene in episode 4, which people felt really redeemed. That the franchise has been known for Benioff and Weiss's gratuitous female nudity, and that Kilner actually handled it like a professionally made erotic movie would, where there has to be cinematography and pacing, not just like giddy 13-year-old finding his first porn magazine, something that's what Benioff would do. That, yeah, again, Kilner managed to deftly handle a brothel scene with gender nudity balance to the point that people found it unremarkable, that it wasn't even pointed out that much in reviews, because it was tastefully handled. And I think this is supposed to be the House of Kisses, and they said that that brothel madam, she was just called Brothel Madam in the season 1 credits. Now she's credited as she's named Sylvie. And I'm wondering if she's based on the book character Sylvena Sand, who is a character who does things later, so this is probably going to be a recurring location, and just the furnishings were beautiful, and the painting they had in the background, I think it was a real painting, the murals and stuff that they're probably going to be revisiting just in terms of the set design and work and costuming that goes into all of that. If I had to list off highs and lows for the episode overall, though, again, everything is a high. It's just relative to other things. How can you complain that, like I said, the standouts were Rhaenyra Daemon and Otto Aegon, but more Otto for this episode as a whole. Like, Mysaria also had a really good scene with Rhaenyra. And it elevated the character, really reintroduced this character that people thought was a low point before. But Mysaria meeting Rhaenyra was not meant to be on the level of Rhaenyra fighting with Daemon as the culmination of a full season of backstory, so they're not comparable scenes. If I had to give one negative for the episode, and this is just relative, it's not a problem, is that in microcosm, as one episode, and that's unfair because it's part of a whole season, Team Velaryon didn't get that much to do, but they got more than they got last episode, because, I mean, we had a bed scene with Corlys and his wife Rhaenys, and again, how Game of Thrones is 13-year-old boys showing off showgirls, that, oh, we have a happily married middle-aged couple having a post-coitus bed scene together, and it was real dialogue that was witty and funny, and it was one scene, but it was good. I mean, Corlys only had one scene in the premiere, but it was also good. Or, Baela didn't talk in the first episode, Rhaena still hasn't, but Baela actually had two scenes, and one was a good character-building scene between her and Jace, just shooting the breeze, talking about their fathers. Or, case in point, the example I'm thinking of is Adam and Alan of Hull, because these aren't royals, and the people complaining, oh, you're showing the people at the lower level, at the dock level. It was one scene for 2 minutes. It was really well done. I'm surprised at how apparently Adam, everyone is now saying he's gorgeous, when it's like, he's an easygoing, nice guy with a smile as wide as his shoulders. But he's not Daemon. He's not a brooding rebel who plays by his own rules. Where's the challenge? I don't know why, if Adam is the nice guy, why would women be attracted to him? They want the brooding rebel. They want the vampire. So, more power to him, Clinton Liberty, that people seem to think he's nice, but I can't understand the ebb and flow of to be judged as fair, and how people think, oh, well, he's cute in that, but whatever. That I will say he had really good chemistry with Abubakar Salim. They're both good actors. You immediately felt these guys are two brothers. And one's the optimist, one's the older one who's more the pragmatist, and look, there's a war coming, it's not about distinguishing yourself, shit's gonna get heavy, people are gonna die. They had really good chemistry, and the dialogue was good. It's just, this scene was not intended to be on the scale of the Daemon Rhaenyra scene. This episode was the aftermath of they just beheaded Aegon's son. So, if you could... But that isn't even a complaint, because that's a season scale thing. And on top of... Because the scenes they were in were good. It's just, we know from trailer, I mean, you've seen the trailers for episode 3, will heavily feature Baela and Rhaena actually discussing all their issues with each other, and Rhaena having scenes with Rhaenyra, and just setting up all of that. So, it was a little light on the Velaryons, but you couldn't even call that a failure. That was the focus of this episode. There'll be other ones for them. This episode, as it stands, yeah, you could debate whether this was the best episode of this series so far, head-to-head with episode 8 of season 1. So, let's hope they keep this up. I am going to be posting a lot of short, like 5-minute thematic videos just about lore things that came up in it. And I know this has just been me gushing about it, but there weren't that many lore things this time. So much it was just, this is the culmination of season 1. This is good camera work, good writing, good art direction, mixed with good acting. And just, this is what I wanted when I thought we were going to get live-action adaptations of the works of George R.R. Martin like a decade ago. This is what it should have been like.